The trading vessel, New Dawn, moved quietly through space, carrying medical supplies and food to the human colonies on the edge of known space. Captain Taiyang sat in his chair on the bridge, watching the stars pass by. He had been flying merchant ships for 20 years, and this route had always been peaceful. His crew was small but skilled. They knew their jobs well. Hannah stood near the communications console, reviewing diplomatic protocols on her tablet. As the lead diplomat for this mission, she took her responsibilities seriously. At 34 years old, she had left military service 5 years ago to work for peace. She believed that talking could solve problems better than fighting. The Galactic Council had rules, and those rules protected everyone. That was what she had been taught. In the medical bay, Jiwan checked the supplies one more time. The young doctor had volunteered for this mission because frontier colonies needed help. She was only 29, but she had already saved many lives. Her hands were gentle as she organized medicines and equipment. She hummed softly while she worked, thinking about the children she would treat at the colonies, down in engineering. Mingi adjusted power levels and monitored the ship's systems. She was a single mother, and her daughter Yunji waited for her back on Earth. Yunji was only 10 years old. Minji had promised to bring her a gift from the colonies. The engineering specialist kept a picture of her daughter next to her workstation. It made the long trips easier to handle, so Eel sat in the small observation room, writing notes about the different alien species they might encounter. As cultural attach, she studied how different races communicated. She was the youngest of the women at 26. She had bright dreams about building friendships between Earth and other worlds. She believed that understanding each other would prevent conflicts. The security officer, Do-Yan, walked the corridors of the ship doing his regular checks. He was 28 and had joined the merchant service because he wanted to see the galaxy without fighting. He carried a small weapon, but he had never fired it at another living being. The thought of violence made him uncomfortable. He preferred things to stay peaceful. Everything changed when the distress signal came. Through Captain Taiyang received the emergency message from a human mining colony on asteroid Epsilon 7. The message was brief and frightened. Alien warships had surrounded their station. They needed help immediately. Taiyang did not hesitate. The New Dawn changed course and rushed toward the asteroid. When they arrived, the sight made everyone on the bridge go quiet. 6 massive Voltorian warships circled the small mining colony like predators around prey. The Voltorian Empire controlled most of the galaxy through fear and military power. Their ships were dark and covered with weapons. They looked designed to kill. Taiyang opened communications carefully. A Voltorian commander appeared on the screen. His name was Kelthrix, and his face was cruel. He had sharp features and cold eyes that showed no mercy. He spoke in a voice that expected obedience. The miners had stolen from the Empire, Kelthrix said. They had taken processed minerals that belonged to Valtoria. The punishment for theft was severe. He would take the colony as compensation. The human miners sent their own message to the New Dawn. They had not stolen anything. The minerals came from their own legally claimed territory. They had followed all Galactic Council rules. They had the documents to prove their rights. But Kelthrix did not care about documents or rules. Taiyang tried to negotiate. He spoke carefully, using all the proper diplomatic language. He mentioned council law and peaceful resolution. He offered to bring both sides to a neutral station for mediation. The Galactic Council had procedures for these disputes. Everyone knew the rules. Kelthrix laughed. It was not a pleasant sound. The council had no power here, he said. This was Valtorian space now. The Empire's law was the only law that mattered. Then he made his demand. He wanted the 4 women from the New Dawn. They would come to his ship as witnesses. They would testify before Valtorian courts. After the trial, he promised they would return safely. Do-Yan immediately objected. His hand moved toward his weapon. But Valtorian soldiers were already moving toward the New Dawn in boarding craft. There were too many of them. The merchant ship had no real weapons. They were not a warship. Fighting would only get everyone killed. Taiyang tried to contact the Galactic Council for help. His communications officer worked frantically at the console. But something was wrong. All their long-range signals were being blocked. The Valtorian ships were jamming everything. No one could hear their calls for help. Hannah made the decision quickly. She touched Taiyang's shoulder and spoke quietly. She would go. She would take Giwan, Minji, and Soyan with her. This would prevent violence against the miners. The 4 women were diplomats and support staff. They were protected by council law. The Valtorians would not dare harm them. The galaxy would respond if official diplomats were hurt. She believed in the system. The other women agreed. Jiwan gathered a small medical kit, thinking she might need to help injured people. Minji sent one last message to her daughter, telling Yunji she loved her. Soyan took her notes about Valtorian culture, hoping her knowledge would help. They walked together to the airlock. Doyan watched them go with tears in his eyes. He felt ashamed that he could not protect them. Taiyang gripped the arms of his chair so hard his knuckles turned white. But they had no choice. The Valtorian ships could destroy the New Dawn and the mining colony in seconds. The women were transported to Kelthrix's flagship. The ship was huge and dark inside. They were taken to what they thought would be a courtroom. Instead, they found themselves in a large chamber with no legal officials. No translators were provided. No defense was offered. The trial lasted only 15 minutes. Everything was conducted in the Valtorian language. The women could not understand what was being said. They tried to object, but guards forced them to stay silent. When the trial ended, Kelthrix read the sentence with satisfaction in his voice. They had been found guilty of economic terrorism against the Empire. The sentence was death by hanging. The execution would be public to send a message to all inferior species. Humans needed to learn their place in the galaxy. Hannah managed to activate her communication device one last time before guards seized it. Her final words were transmitted back to the New Dawn in a burst of static. Tell Earth what they did to us. Then the signal went dead. The executions were carried out in front of the mining colony. The Valtorians forced everyone to watch. They broadcasted on all frequencies so every ship in the area would see. 4 innocent women died at the end of ropes, while aliens watched and did nothing to help. Their bodies were displayed on the external hull of the flagship as a warning. This was what happened to humans who challenged the Empire. This was what happened to those who thought council law would protect them. Captain, Taiyang managed to send one encrypted message back to Earth before Kelthrix decided the New Dawn knew too much. The Valtorian ships opened fire. The merchant vessel broke apart under the weapons fire. Most of the crew died instantly. Only Doyan survived. He had been checking the emergency pods when the attack began. The explosion threw his pod clear of the ship. He floated in space, watching the New Dawn burn. He watched the mining colony get destroyed. He recorded everything his pod's systems could capture. His pod was eventually picked up by another human ship 3 days later. By then, his message had already reached Earth. The images of 4 women hanging dead in space had been seen by billions of people. The galaxy waited to see what humanity would do. The Galactic Council met in emergency session. They discussed the incident for hours. In the end, they issued a statement of strong condemnation. But they took no action. The Valtorian Empire claimed they had followed their own imperial law. That law superseded council authority in Valtorian-controlled space. There was nothing the council could do. Back on Earth, there was silence. Not the silence of acceptance, but the silence of rage so deep that words could not express it. The families of Hannah, Giwan, Minji, and Soyan received the news. Minji's daughter Yunji saw her mother die on a screen. She was only 10 years old. The galaxy expected humanity to complain and then submit. Earth had always been peaceful. Humans preferred trade to war. They were new to galactic politics and weak compared to the great empires. Everyone thought humanity would accept this tragedy and move on. Everyone was wrong. Earth mourned for 7 days. Every city went silent at the same hour to remember the 4 women. Their names were spoken in every language. Jiwan, Minji, and Soyan became more than victims. They became symbols of everything humanity had tried to be in the galaxy. They had gone in peace, believing in justice, and they had been murdered for it. The Korean government filed formal complaints with every office in the Galactic Council. They provided evidence, testimony, and legal arguments. The documents filled thousands of pages. They demanded justice. They demanded the Valtorian Empire be held accountable. They demanded Kelthric's face trial for murder. The council deliberated for 3 weeks. Representatives from 80 different species discussed the incident. Some species expressed sympathy. Others said nothing. The powerful ones, those who feared Valtorian military strength, argued that the council had no jurisdiction. Finally, the council issued its decision. They concluded that Valtorian internal law applied to the case. The empire had sovereignty over its own territory. The council could not interfere with how member empires conducted their legal proceedings. The decision was announced on every news channel across the galaxy. Humans everywhere watched the council representative read the statement. Oh God. The man's voice was apologetic but firm. Rules were rules. Sovereignty was sovereignty. Nothing could be done. Public outrage swept across Earth like wildfire. 3 billion people had seen Do-yoon's footage of the execution. They'd watched 4 innocent women die. Now they learned that the galaxy considered this legal. The lesson was clear. Humanity had no real protection. Peace had no value if others chose violence. Protests filled the streets of every major city. People carried pictures of the 4 women. They chanted slogans demanding action. Earth government faced pressure unlike anything in history. Citizens demanded their leaders do something. Anything. They could not let this stand. The President of Earth appeared on global broadcast 2 days after the Council's decision. Her face was grave, her voice was steady. She announced that Earth would withdraw all ambassadors from the Galactic Council effective immediately. She declared the Valtorian Empire a hostile entity beyond diplomatic resolution. And she activated protocols that humanity had kept hidden since joining the galactic community. The secret came out in carefully chosen words. Earth had maintained military research programs that the Council never knew about. When humanity joined the galaxy, they had been told their weapons were too aggressive. Their military technology had to be limited. They had agreed publicly. But privately, certain projects had continued in hidden facilities. Admiral Junho was appointed Supreme Military Commander of the newly formed Combined Earth Fleet. He was 50 years old, a career officer who had trained in the old military before Earth pretended to be defenseless. He understood warfare. More importantly, he understood that peace required the ability to defend it. Recruitment. Centers were overwhelmed within hours of the announcement. 60 million people volunteered in the first week alone. The waiting lists grew so long that many volunteers were turned away. Among those accepted was a 19-year-old girl named Yoonji. She was Minji's daughter, the little girl who had waited for her mother to come home. Yoonji joined the Naval Aviation program. She told the recruiter she wanted to fly fighters. When asked why, she showed a picture of her mother. "They killed her for trying to help people," she said quietly. "I want to make sure they can never do that to anyone else." Hannah's younger brother, Hyunwoo, enlisted in Special Operations Forces. He was 25 and had been studying engineering before the executions. He abandoned his degree and volunteered the day after the funeral. His parents tried to stop him, but he refused to listen. He needed to do something. Soyeon's fiancé Minho became a combat medic. He had been a doctor in a civilian hospital. He believed in saving lives, not taking them. But he also believed in protecting the innocent. If war was coming, then wounded people would need help. He would provide that help. Giwon's father, Sung-woo, came out of retirement. He was 68 years old and had been an engineer during Earth's pre-contact military era. He knew weapons systems that younger people had never seen. The government asked him to lead a design team. He accepted immediately. His daughter's death had taken away his peace. Work was all he had left. The technology that Earth revealed shocked the galaxy. Hidden factories and asteroid belts began producing warships. These were not merchant vessels with light defensive weapons. These were true warships designed for combat. The hulls were covered in stealth coating that made them invisible to conventional sensors. The engines could accelerate to speeds that most alien ships could not match. The weapons were worse. Humanity had developed kinetic kill missiles that traveled at fractional light speed. When they hit, they released energy equivalent to nuclear weapons. There were plasma cannons, railguns, and particle beams. There were also quantum entanglement communication systems that could not be jammed by any known technology. The most shocking revelation was what humanity had done with captured alien technology. Over the decades of peaceful trade, Earth had quietly obtained samples of various alien devices. Sometimes through trade, sometimes through salvage, sometimes through means no one discussed. Every piece had been studied, reverse-engineered, and improved. An intelligence network that no one knew existed suddenly activated across Valtorian space. Agents who had been posing as merchants, traders, and travelers for years received their orders. They began gathering information about Valtorian military, positions, fleet movements, and economic infrastructure. The network was led by an operative named Nari. She had been embedded in Valtorian territory for 8 years. She ran a small trading company that sold human goods to alien customers. No one suspected her. She had friends among the Valtorians. Some of them even trusted her. Now she used that trust to gather intelligence. Nari discovered crucial information. The Valtorian Empire was not as unified as it appeared. Several subject species hated their overlords, but were too weak to resist. The Empire ruled through fear and military superiority. If that superiority could be challenged, the entire structure might collapse. She also identified Kelthrix's current location, commanded a battle group patrolling the border regions. His fleet consisted of 12 warships and various support vessels. He was still displaying the bodies of the 4 women on his flagship. He considered them trophies. He boasted about the executions to other officers. Admiral Junho studied all the intelligence carefully. He developed a strategy that surprised many traditional military officers. He did not plan to attack Valtorian military bases directly. Instead, he would target their economy. Mining operations, trade routes, processing facilities, and shipping lanes would be the primary objectives. The goal was to make the cost of their atrocity unbearable. Every day that Kelthrix remained free, the Valtorian Empire would lose money. Every day they refused to hand him over, their economy would suffer. Eventually, the Emperor would have to choose between one commander and the economic survival of his empire. The combined Earth fleet began taking shape. 200 warships were constructed in 6 months using automated orbital factories. The construction process used techniques that most aliens had never seen. Robots worked around the clock. Assembly lines operated continuously. Ships were built faster than anyone thought possible. Training programs pushed recruits through condensed courses. What normally took 3 years was compressed into 9 months. The training was brutal. Many people quit. But those who remained became skilled quickly. They learned weapons, systems, tactics, navigation, and combat procedures. They learned to work as teams where every person's survival depended on the others. Youngji proved to be a natural pilot. She could handle a fighter in ways that surprised her instructors. She practiced for hours beyond what was required. Other trainees went to sleep, but she stayed in the simulators. Her squadron mates began calling her Ghost, because she could appear from nowhere in simulated combat. Hyunwoo became the youngest person ever to complete the Special Operations Qualification course. The training destroyed many candidates physically and mentally. Hyunwoo endured everything they threw at him. When instructors asked him why he pushed so hard, he showed them a picture of his sister. That was all the explanation needed. Min struggled with his training. He was a healer by nature. Learning to operate in combat zones felt wrong. He questioned whether he should be there. An older medic talked to him one night and explained something important. Healing is always right, the man said, even in war. Especially in war, healing is the most important thing you can do. Songwoo's team designed weapons that made younger engineers nervous. He understood the destructive power they were creating. But he also remembered watching his daughter die on a screen, unable to help her. Every missile he designed, every torpedo he perfected, was a promise that other parents would not lose their children the same way. The Galactic Council watched Earth's military build-up with growing alarm. Several species sent private warnings. They told human diplomats that the Valtorian Empire had crushed rebellions before. Their military had centuries of experience. Earth was making a mistake. Fighting would only lead to humanity's extinction. The combined Earth fleet emerged from faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Belta 9 system. The mining hub was one of the Valtorian Empire's most productive facilities. Hundreds of automated stations processed minerals from the asteroid belt. 30 cargo ships waited to transport processed materials to Valtorian worlds. It was a perfect target. Admiral Junho gave no warning. There was no demand for surrender. The human ships simply opened fire. Kinetic missiles crossed the distance in seconds. They struck the automated stations with devastating accuracy. Each impact released enormous energy. Stations that had operated for decades vanished in flashes of light. The cargo ships tried to scatter, but they were merchant vessels, slow and unarmed. Human warships intercepted them easily. The crews of the cargo ships were taken prisoner. They surrendered quickly when they realized resistance was pointless. Human marines boarded each vessel and secured the crew. The aliens were frightened. They expected to be executed or tortured. Instead, they were given food, medical attention, and comfortable quarters. They were treated according to the Geneva Convention rules that Earth had. Followed for centuries, the entire operation took 4 hours. When it was finished, Belta 9 no longer existed as a productive facility. The Valtorian Empire had lost billions in infrastructure and materials, but not a single prisoner had been harmed. Not one crew member had been killed after surrender. Admiral Junho broadcast a message across all Valtorian communication channels. The transmission included footage of the 4 women's execution alongside images of the well-treated prisoners. The contrast was deliberate and stark. The Valtorian Empire murdered 4 innocent women, Junho said calmly. They displayed their bodies as trophies. The Galactic Council did nothing. Now Earth responds. We seek no territory. We want no empire. We want justice. Surrender Commander Kelthrix and his officers for trial. Pay 20 billion credits in reparations to the families. Issue a public apology from your emperor. Meet these demands, and this war ends immediately. Refuse, and we will continue. The Valtorian government responded within hours. The emperor himself appeared in a broadcast. He was old and arrogant, sitting on a throne surrounded by advisors. He called humans an insignificant infestation. He said Earth would be crushed for its impudence. He promised that every human in the galaxy would pay for this attack. The demands were rejected completely. Admiral Junho had expected this response. He ordered the fleet to the next target. Over the following 2 months, Earth forces struck 6 more economic installations. Each attack followed the same pattern. Human ships appeared without warning, destroyed infrastructure with precise strikes, captured any ships present, and treated prisoners well. The Valtorian military repeatedly arrived too late. Human stealth technology and intelligence networks gave Earth's forces a decisive advantage. The economic damage mounted. The Valtorian Empire was losing money faster than it could replace it. Trade routes became dangerous. Merchants refused to enter certain systems. Insurance costs skyrocketed. The Emperor's advisors began arguing about how to respond. Meanwhile, human engineers studied every captured Valtorian ship carefully. They analyzed weapons, engines, shields, and sensors. Every weakness was cataloged. Every design flaw was noted. The information was compiled into detailed tactical databases that every human captain could access. Nari's intelligence network provided the breakthrough Junho needed. She discovered that Kelthrix was assembling a large task force. He had convinced the Emperor to give him command of a major fleet. His mission was to exterminate the human vermin once and for all. Kelthrix was confident. He had 40 heavy cruisers, 12 dreadnoughts, and 100 support vessels. It was more than enough to crush 200 human ships. Junho studied the intelligence and smiled. Kelthrix was predictable. He was arrogant. He still thought of humans as weak and primitive. That arrogance would be his downfall. The Admiral devised a plan that relied on deception. He ordered most of the fleet to hide in an asteroid field near a small human mining colony. The ships would power down completely and use their stealth coating to become invisible. Only 80 ships would remain visible. Defending the colony, from Kelthrix's perspective, it would look like an opportunity. The human colony would appear vulnerable. A small defensive force could be overwhelmed easily. He could bombard the colony and kill more humans. He could display their bodies just like he had done with the 4 women. It would be a great victory. Kelthrix took the bait perfectly. His fleet arrived in the system and immediately began preparations for attack. He broadcast a message to the colony, telling them they would all die. He reminded them what happened to humans who challenged the Empire. He laughed as he gave the order to begin bombardment. The first missiles from Kelthrix's fleet struck the colony installations. Explosions blossomed across the surface. Buildings collapsed. But something was wrong. There were no distress signals. No panicked communications. No screams then. Yunho sprang the trap. 200 human ships emerged from the asteroids, powering up their systems simultaneously. They'd been hiding less than 1,000 kilometers away. Kelthrix's fleet was suddenly surrounded. Human ships appeared on all sides, weapons armed and locked on targets. The colony had been evacuated days earlier. It was a decoy filled with sensors and remote equipment. Every building Kelthrix had destroyed was empty. He had bombed nothing but metal and stone while walking into a perfect ambush. JUNHO used the quantum entanglement communications to coordinate all ships simultaneously. The Voltorians could not jam the signals. They could not intercept the orders. The human fleet moved with perfect coordination while Kelthrix's ships struggled to respond. The battle lasted 7 hours. It was brutal and desperate. Voltorian ships fought with everything they had. Their weapons were powerful. Their crews were experienced. But they were surrounded, outnumbered, facing an enemy that knew all their weaknesses. Yunji's fighter squadron intercepted Voltorian bombers trying to break through the encirclement. The dogfight was fast and violent. Fighters spun and twisted through 3-dimensional space. Weapons fire lit up the darkness. Yunji shot down 4 enemy fighters in quick succession. Her movements were precise and ruthless. Every kill avenged her mother a little more. Hyunwoo led a boarding team onto Kelthrix's flagship. The Special Operations team breached the hull using shaped charges and entered the ship. Fighting inside the corridors was close and personal. Hand-to-hand combat in zero gravity was chaotic. Hyunwoo's team advanced, meter by meter. Clearing each section carefully, Minho's medical team worked frantically in the fleet hospital. Wounded humans and captured Voltorians arrived constantly. Minho treated them all the same. Some of his squad mates objected to helping enemy soldiers. Minho ignored them. "Pain is pain," he said firmly. "I heal everyone." He saved lives from both sides while the battle raged. Sangwoo's experimental plasma torpedoes proved devastatingly effective. The weapons he had designed burned through Voltorian shields faster than expected. Each torpedo carried enough energy to cripple a cruiser. The Voltorian fleet began losing ships rapidly. Some captains tried to surrender. Junho accepted every surrender immediately and ordered those ships protected. Kelthrix's flagship was taking heavy damage. The ship's shields had failed. Hull breaches vented atmosphere into space. Life support was failing in multiple sections. The Voltorian commander ordered his crew to fight to the death. He activated the self-destruct sequence, intending to take as many humans with him as possible. But human intelligence had predicted this. Hyunwoo's team had hacked into the ship's computer systems during their advance. When Kelthrix tried to activate self-destruct, nothing happened. The system had been disabled. His last option was gone. Hyunwoo's team breached the command center door. They found Kelthrix surrounded by his remaining officers. The Voltorian commander drew a blade and prepared to fight. He was skilled with the weapon, slashing at the first human through the door. But Hyunwoo was faster. He disarmed Kelthrix with 3 precise moves and forced him to the ground. "You hanged for innocent women," Hyunwoo said quietly. "One of them was my sister." You displayed their bodies like trophies. Now, you will face justice. Hyun Woo secured him in restraints. Then you have nothing to fear from a fair trial. The battle ended an hour later. The Valtorian fleet was destroyed or captured. 8,000 enemy personnel were now prisoners. Human losses were 18 ships and 437 casualties. Every human who died was mourned. Their names would be remembered. The victory was celebrated across Earth. But Admiral Junho warned that this was only the beginning. The Valtorian Emperor would not accept this defeat. He would respond with overwhelming force. The real war was just starting. The Emperor's response came faster than expected. He appeared in a broadcast that reached the entire galaxy. His face was twisted with rage. He declared total war against humanity. Every Valtorian ship would hunt humans. Every resource would be devoted to Earth's destruction. The human species would be exterminated. The Galactic Council called an emergency session. Representatives from dozens of species demanded that Earth cease hostilities. They called for immediate negotiations. They said the violence had to stop before it spread. The trial of Commander Kelthrix began 3 weeks after his capture. Earth conducted it in full view of the galaxy. Every species with communication technology could watch the proceedings. Humanity wanted everyone to see the difference between their justice and Valtorian cruelty. The courtroom was simple but dignified. Kelthrix sat in the defendant's chair, surrounded by security but not restrained. He had been provided with legal defenders, translators, and access to all evidence. The trial followed international law that Earth had refined over centuries. The charges were read clearly. Murder of 4 unarmed civilians. War crimes. Violations of sentient rights. The prosecution presented evidence methodically. Do-yeon testified about what he witnessed. The footage of the execution was shown. Ship's logs proved the women had diplomatic status and were protected under multiple treaties. Kelthrix showed no remorse during the trial. When asked if he regretted his actions, he laughed. They were humans, he said coldly. Animals unworthy of rights? I would do it again. His lawyers tried to stop him from speaking, but he dismissed them. He was proud of what he had done. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Every piece of evidence was examined carefully. Kelthrix was given every opportunity to defend himself. Finally, the International Tribunal reached its verdict. The sentence was announced to the entire galaxy. Life imprisonment without possibility of parole. Kelthrix would spend the rest of his life in a secure facility. He would never be free again. But he would not be executed. Humanity refused to become the monsters they were fighting against. They would show the galaxy that justice did not require cruelty. The Valtorian Empire rejected the trial as meaningless. The Emperor demanded Kelthrix's immediate return. He said no human court had authority over Valtorian citizens. He threatened terrible revenge if his commander was not released. Admiral Junho ignored the threats. He was focused on a different problem. Intelligence reports showed that Emperor Thraken was personally leading a fleet of 5,000 warships toward Earth. The force was massive enough to overwhelm any defense. If they reached Earth's solar system, billions of humans would die. Traditional military commanders wanted to defend Earth directly. They argued for massing the entire fleet in defensive positions around the planet. It was standard military doctrine. Protect the homeworld at all costs. Junho proposed something different. He wanted to split the fleet into rapid response task forces and attack Valtorian subject worlds. Instead of waiting for the enemy to come to Earth, he would strike at the foundation of their empire. The strategy caused heated debates among Earth's leadership. Some called it reckless. They said abandoning Earth's direct defense was insane. But Junho explained his reasoning carefully. The war was not just about military victory. It was about showing the galaxy that oppression had consequences. Freeing enslaved species would accomplish more than any battle. Nera's intelligence network had expanded dramatically. She now had contacts in 6 different subject species. All of them hated the Valtorians. All of them wanted freedom. But they were too weak to rebel alone. They needed help. One species in particular caught Junho's attention. The Korvathi had been occupied for 300 years. They were a peaceful people who had been conquered without mercy. The Valtorians had taken their world and used them as slave labor. Generations of Korvathi had been born into servitude, but Nari discovered something important. The Korvathi had maintained a secret resistance movement. They had hidden weapons and trained fighters. They were waiting for an opportunity. They could provide crucial intelligence about Valtorian fleet operations. In exchange, they wanted help liberating their homeworld. JUNHO made the decision. The combined Earth fleet would split into task forces. The largest group would remain near Earth to defend against direct attack. The rest would spread across Valtorian space, liberating oppressed worlds and supporting rebellions. The first target was the Korvathi homeworld. Human ships jumped into the system with Korvathi resistance fighters aboard. The resistance had provided detailed maps of orbital defenses and garrison positions. The attack was planned down to the minute. Yonji led her fighter squadron in the opening strike. They swept aside Valtorian patrol craft and cleared the way for the larger ships. Her flying was precise and deadly. She had become one of the best pilots in the fleet. Other pilots followed her lead because she always brought them home safely. The battle for Korvathi orbit was intense but short. Valtorian garrison forces fought hard, but they were isolated from reinforcement. Human ships used their superior technology to disable enemy vessels quickly. When Valtorian ships tried to surrender, Junho accepted immediately. Prisoners were treated well, just as always. Korvathi resistance forces launched simultaneous uprisings on the surface. They attacked Valtorian administrative centers and military bases. Human special operations teams assisted them. Hyenwoo's unit helped coordinate the attacks and provided training and combat tactics. The Valtorian occupiers were overwhelmed within days. The garrison commander surrendered when he realized the situation was hopeless. The Korvathi homeworld was free for the first time in 3 centuries. The population celebrated in the streets. They had never believed this day would come. Human engineers helped the Korvathi establish their own planetary defense network. Captured Valtorian weapons were turned over to Korvathi forces. Earth provided training and support, but did not occupy the world. This was their planet, their freedom. Humans were there to help, not to rule. News of the liberation spread through the Valtorian Empire faster than anyone expected. 4 more subject species launched uprisings within weeks. They had been waiting for a sign that resistance was possible. The fall of the Korvathi garrison was that sign. Human task forces rushed to support each rebellion. They provided weapons, training, and military support. Each world that gained freedom weakened Valtorian control. The Empire's resources were stretched thinner and thinner. Emperor Thraken was forced to detach units from his massive fleet to suppress rebellions. He could not allow the Empire to collapse while he attacked Earth, ships that were supposed to destroy. Humanity were instead fighting to maintain control over subject worlds. Minhos. Medical teams worked tirelessly across multiple worlds. They treated wounded resistance fighters and established field hospitals. The young doctor found himself saving lives in conditions he never imagined, but he also saw the results of 3 centuries of occupation. The Valtorians had been cruel masters. Minho treated injuries that were years old, conditions that had never been properly cared for. It strengthened his resolve. Songwoo's defense network technology was shared with the freed worlds. Earth could not protect everyone, but they could help people protect themselves. Automated defense stations and missile batteries gave former subjects the means to fight back. It was not charity. It was justice. An unexpected message reached Admiral Junho from deep within Valtorian space. The sender identified himself as Admiral Valter, cousin to Emperor Thraken. He was a high-ranking Valtorian officer commanding part of the fleet heading toward Earth. Valter's message was shocking. He opposed the Emperor's cruelty. Many Valtorians were ashamed of how the Empire treated subject species. Kelthrix's execution of the 4 women had been particularly disgusting. It violated even basic Valtorian military honor. Valter offered intelligence about the fleet in exchange for a promise of fair treatment. If he surrendered, JUNHO struggled with the decision. Could he trust an enemy officer? Was this a trap? But the intelligence Walter offered was too valuable to ignore. Fleet compositions, supply routes, communication codes, and most importantly, vulnerabilities in the command network. After consulting with Earth's leadership, Jinho accepted the offer. He promised that any Valtorian who surrendered would be treated justly. War crimes would be prosecuted, but honorable soldiers would be respected. It was a gamble, but one based on principle. Walter provided access codes to the Valtorian fleet's centralized command network. The system allowed the Emperor to coordinate thousands of ships simultaneously. It was powerful, but had a critical weakness. If the network was disrupted, every ship would operate independently instead of as a unified force. Emperor Thraken's reduced fleet of 3,000 ships finally reached Earth's solar system. He had been forced to leave 2,000 ships behind to suppress rebellions. But 3,000 warships was still overwhelming force. Earth's defensive fleet numbered only 500 ships. The battle began with a massive bombardment. Valtorian weapons fired at Earth's orbital stations and defensive satellites. Sangwoo's defense network absorbed and deflected most of the attacks, but some got through. Explosions blossomed in orbit. Debris rained down on the planet. 2 million people died in the first wave of attack. Youngji's fighter wings launched from orbital carriers. They faced impossible odds, but they did not hesitate. Human fighters weaved through the massive Voltorian formation, striking at weak points and trying to disrupt their coordination. Youngji shot down 6 enemy fighters in the opening minutes. Her squadron followed her example, fighting with desperate courage. The Earth fleet fought a controlled retreat, drawing Valtorian forces away from the planet. Yunho needed to buy time for the special operation he had planned. Everything depended on the next few hours. The Valtorian Empire collapsed within 3 months. Without Emperor Thraken and without their command structure, the remaining forces fractured into 17 separate territories. Some tried to maintain the old ways. Others embraced reform. Most simply fell apart as subject species rose up and claimed their independence. Emperor Thraken stood trial just as Kelthrix had. The proceedings were broadcast to the entire galaxy. The charges were extensive. Crimes against humanity. Crimes against multiple other species. Ordering the execution of diplomats. Starting a war of aggression. Thousands of counts spanning decades of cruelty. Thraken showed no remorse, just like Kelthrix. He declared that might made right. The strong ruled the weak. That was the natural order of the universe. The court found him guilty on every charge. His sentence matched Kelthrix's. Life imprisonment without parole. He would live, but he would never be free. Earth began the long process of rebuilding. Orbital stations were repaired. New defensive networks were constructed. The 2 million people who died in the final battle were mourned properly. Each name was recorded in a memorial database. They would not be forgotten. The freed species celebrated their independence. The Korvathi offered formal alliance with humanity. They were the first to do so, but not the last. 6 other species approached Earth with proposals for mutual defense and cooperation. They had fought together against oppression. Now they wanted to build something better together. Minho's medical teams became the foundation for an interspecies humanitarian organization. The young doctor had proven that healing transcended politics and war. His organization would provide medical care to any species in need, regardless of their past. Former enemies and allies alike would receive help. Suffering knew no sides. Sangwoo's defensive technology was shared freely with allied worlds. Earth did not try to maintain a monopoly on military power. Instead, they helped others protect themselves. The old engineer had designed weapons to avenge his daughter. Now, those same technologies would prevent other parents from losing their children. Yonji continued her military career. She was promoted rapidly and eventually became an admiral. At only 35 years old, she commanded an entire fleet. She kept her mother's picture in her office. Visitors would ask about it, and she would tell them the story. She never let anyone forget why the war had started. Hyunwoo retired from military service after 5 years. He became an instructor at the military academy, teaching ethics and the laws of warfare. Every class began with him showing a picture of his sister Hannah. He would tell the students what happened to her and why it mattered. Soldiers had power, he taught them. That power had to be used responsibly. Cruelty was never acceptable, even against enemies. Nari came out of the shadows. Her identity as an intelligence operative was finally revealed. She received the highest civilian honors from 7 different governments. The shy merchant who had seemed so ordinary was actually a master spy who had changed the course of the war. She smiled at the ceremonies, but said little. Some secrets were better kept. The question of what to do with Kelthrix became controversial. A movement emerged calling for his execution. Many people believed he deserved death for murdering for innocent women. The families of Hannah, Giwan, Mingi, and Soyin were divided on the issue. Hannah's parents held a press conference. Her mother spoke carefully, choosing each word with thought. Our daughter believed in justice, not revenge. She believed in law, not cruelty. If we execute Kelthrix, we become what we fought against. He will stay in prison for the rest of his life. That is justice enough. Earth maintained its principles. No death penalty, even for the worst criminals. Kelthrix remained in a secure facility. He served as a living reminder of the consequences of cruelty. Young people visited the prison on school trips. They would see him there, an old alien sitting in a cell. Teachers would explain what he had done and why he would never be free. The galaxy slowly changed. Subject species integrated into the galactic community as equals. The Galactic Council was reformed with new rules. A permanent interspecies court of justice was established with real enforcement powers. Never again would an empire be allowed to murder innocents without consequences. Some older races resisted the changes. They had benefited from the old system, where might made right, but they could not deny humanity's moral authority. Earth had fought a war for justice, not conquest. They had freed the oppressed instead of enslaving them. They had treated enemies fairly, even when those enemies had been cruel. Admiral Valter helped establish a new democratic government on Valtoria Prime. The reformed Valtorians rejected their imperial past. It was a long, difficult process. Many subject species did not trust them. The hatred built over centuries could not disappear overnight. But Valter and others like him worked to make amends. New challenges emerged as the galaxy adjusted to its new reality. Pirates exploited the power vacuum in former Valtorian territories. Criminal organizations grew bold. Hardline imperial loyalists waged insurgent campaigns. Earth's fleet committed to peacekeeping across a wider territory than ever before. Admiral Don Ho remained as supreme military commander. He adapted the military for peacetime operations. The focus shifted from warfighting to stability operations. Human ships patrolled trade routes and protected vulnerable worlds. The lessons learned in combat were applied to keeping the peace. 10 years after the executions, the galaxy looked completely different. Former Valtorian territories had become a federation of independent democracies. Trade flourished between worlds that had been enemies. Children were born who would never know imperial oppression. Earth was recognized as a major power in galactic politics. But humanity used its influence carefully. They remembered being weak. They remembered asking for help and being ignored. They would not become the next empire. Power had to be balanced with responsibility. The integration of cultures accelerated. Freed species shared their knowledge and traditions. Human culture spread through the galaxy, but Earth was careful to respect local customs. Universal translator technology improved dramatically, breaking down language barriers. People who had been strangers became friends. Doyan finally published his memoir 25 years after the executions. He had spent years writing about his experiences, about watching for women die, about surviving when others did not. The book became required reading in schools across 40 different worlds. Students learned about Hannah, Guanmingi, and Soyen. They learned how for women went in peace and died for it. They learned how that death sparked a war that freed billions. They learned that innocence must be protected and that cruelty must face consequences. A permanent memorial was built on Earth. At the site where the 4 women had lived, the monument was simple but powerful. for statues of women standing together looking up at the stars. An eternal flame burned at the base. The inscription read, "They sought peace." Their deaths taught us that justice requires strength. Every year on the anniversary, representatives from 100 species gathered at the memorial. The ceremony grew larger each year as more worlds joined the galactic community. They came to remember for women who died. They came to celebrate the peace that followed. They came to recommit to the principles that justice and mercy could coexist. Yunji always attended the ceremony. Even in her 70s, she made the trip. She would stand before the memorial and look at the statue of her mother. She would remember being 10 years old and watching her mother die. She would remember enlisting at 19. She would remember every battle, every friend lost, every enemy defeated. Then she would speak to the assembled crowd. Her voice was old but strong. My mother died believing in peace. Her death showed us that peace must be defended. The Valtorian Empire thought humans were weak because we preferred not to fight. They learned differently. The galaxy learned that humanity protects its people. We remember the 4 women. We honor them by ensuring no one else dies the way they did. The ceremony would end with a moment of silence. 100 species standing together, honoring for humans who had died far from home. Then people would leave, returning to their lives in a galaxy. That was safer because those 4 women had been avenged. The memorial included one final inscription, added 10 years after the original construction. It captured the entire story in simple words. They hanged for women. Humanity unleashed war. But in the end, justice brought peace that oppression never could. Children would ask their parents what the words meant. Parents would tell them the story. They would explain that good people sometimes died for doing nothing wrong. They would explain that when that happened, the rest of us had a duty to seek justice. Not revenge, but justice. The galaxy learned a lesson from humanity's war against the Valtorian Empire. Peaceful species deserved protection. Aggressive oppressors would face united response. The strong had responsibility to defend the weak. Might did not make right. Right made right, and right was worth fighting for. Kelthrix and Thraken lived out their days in prison. They watched from behind bars as the galaxy they had tried to dominate became something they never imagined. Free, equal, just. Their empires were gone. Their power was broken. Their cruelty was remembered only as a warning.